Your phone rings and your stomach drops. Not because it's bad news, not because you're busy, but because answering means performing a conversation in real time with no pause button, no time to think, no way to edit what comes out of your mouth before it's already been heard. So you let it ring. You text back 2 minutes later asking what they need. And every single time someone acts like that's strange, like preferring text over calls means you're antisocial or afraid of human connection, you feel misunderstood. Because it's not about avoiding people, it's about how your brain actually works. Psychologists have spent years studying communication preferences, and what they've found reveals something most people miss entirely. The way you choose to communicate isn't just habit or generational difference. It's a window into how you process information, manage energy, and regulate emotion. People who prefer texting over phone calls aren't running from connection. They're optimizing it in ways that match their cognitive architecture. And the research on this is far more specific than you'd expect. Text communication reduces cognitive load by 40 to 60% compared to voice conversations. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between your brain working comfortably and your brain scrambling to keep up. Phone calls require simultaneous processing of vocal tone, pacing, turn-taking cues, and content formulation, all without the pause button that text provides. You're essentially running 4 programs at once, while also generating responses in real time. For some people that feels natural. For others, it feels like mental juggling while someone watches and waits. Here's what makes this preference psychological, rather than just practical. Texting gives you time to regulate emotions. You can pause, think, and edit before hitting send. The University of Pennsylvania found that people often feel more comfortable expressing vulnerability through written communication, specifically because of this processing time. Your brain gets space to organize what it actually wants to express, instead of blurting out whatever reaches your mouth first. Cognitive psychologists call people who prefer texting strategic thinkers. They're not avoiding interaction, they're optimizing it. But there's another layer most people don't talk about. For introverts, phone calls aren't just cognitively demanding. They're energetically draining in a way texts never are. And this isn't about being shy or antisocial. It's about how people recharge. Research by Liu and Lenhart from 2023 found that introverts prefer text-based communication because it allows them to engage socially while maintaining their energy boundaries. They can respond at their own pace, in their own time, with carefully thought-out answers instead of whatever comes out under pressure. Phone calls demand immediate processing and response, which for introverts feels like running a sprint when you'd rather walk. Then there's the anxiety factor that almost nobody wants to admit. Studies on telephone anxiety, which is a real form of communication apprehension, found a positive correlation between using digital technologies and increased phone anxiety. Recent survey data shows 55% of young adults keep their phone on silent specifically to avoid calls. Even calls from known numbers significantly increase anxiety levels, particularly for millennials. And the reason isn't mysterious. Phone calls feel like an ambush. They demand immediate attention and energy you might not have in that exact moment, even if you love the person calling. What's fascinating is how this plays out in actual relationships and work environments. Take Marcus, a software engineer, who showed researchers his text history. Each message was a miniature masterpiece of efficiency, exactly the information needed, nothing more, nothing less. He explained that phone calls force him to navigate social pleasantries, deal with tangents, and often spend 20 minutes extracting 5 minutes of actual information. His texts anticipate questions, provide context, and preempt misunderstandings in a single well-crafted message. That's not coldness. That's communication designed for maximum effectiveness, with minimum cognitive drain. But here's where it gets complicated, because the preference for text over calls isn't just about efficiency or anxiety or introversion. There's something deeper happening that has to do with control, boundaries, and how you've learned to protect your mental space in a world that demands constant availability. Psychology connects healthy boundaries to emotional resilience and long-term well-being. People who prefer texting are often people who've learned that constant access leads to burnout. Dr. Sherry Turkle's research at MIT found that asynchronous communication like texting allows people to maintain healthier boundaries between work and personal life. You get to choose when you respond and when you talk, which isn't avoidance, it's autonomy. When your schedule already feels tight, that choice becomes essential rather than optional. Sometimes it's about momentum. When you're focused, you want to stay focused. A ringing phone breaks concentration, and it can take 20 minutes to get back into the groove. Texting gives you the power to engage without derailing whatever you're currently building. For individuals with a high need for control, this aspect is incredibly appealing. Not because they're controlling people, but because they understand how fragile attention really is. Here's where the generational piece gets interesting. Millennials grew up texting instead of calling friends and family. They prefer text communications because they can send and receive short messages that get to the point. As a result, they genuinely dislike talking on the phone and feel it's inefficient. 90% of Gen Z prefer messaging over calls, though 42% still value face-to-face connection for important topics. Baby boomers, by contrast, value structure and voice-based communication. They use texting for functional purposes, not conversation. Having meaningful text exchanges can feel uncomfortable or even stressful to them. What research has found is that while everyone texts, the content and interpretation differ dramatically by generation. It's not just preference, it's the environment you developed inside. But there's one piece that complicates the entire narrative. Texting isn't always about comfort or efficiency. Sometimes it's about emotional regulation in relationships, where the stakes are highest. One person noticed in their marriage that when something feels emotionally loaded, they text first. It helps them settle before talking in person. It reduces the chance of saying something sharp or dramatic. Then the conversation becomes more productive when they actually speak face to face. That's not avoiding intimacy. That's creating space for more thoughtful communication. When you have time to process emotions and carefully consider your words, you can engage more authentically in important discussions. The text-first approach serves as emotional regulation that prevents reactive communication and allows for measured responses. In close relationships where impulsive words cause lasting damage, the ability to pause and craft a response that truly represents your thoughts without real-time pressure can actually deepen intimacy rather than diminish it. Research from George Mason University revealed that text-based formats offer perceived control and reduced risk of negative evaluation. The linear nature of writing allows for more thorough reflection and the ability to articulate ideas with greater clarity. Writing involves a higher level of conscious thought, allowing people to present more nuanced arguments. Spoken interactions are significantly more verbose and exhibit greater repetition, which is functional for maintaining coherence while exploring ideas, but text-based interaction favors precision and refinement. So when someone tells you they'd rather text than call, they're not being difficult or distant. They're showing you how their brain works best, how they maintain boundaries that keep them functional, and how they've adapted to a world that demands too much, too fast, too often. They're protecting the quality of their attention and the thoughtfulness of their responses in an environment designed to fragment both. The preference isn't a flaw. It's a highly developed skill for managing cognitive load, emotional regulation, and relational depth in a world that mistakes constant availability for actual connection. People who prefer texting have figured out that you can be present without being instantly accessible, that you can communicate deeply without speaking aloud, and that sometimes the most authentic version of yourself is the one that gets 30 seconds to think before responding. You're not weird for preferring text. You're not cold for letting calls go to voicemail. You're someone who understands how you think, how you recharge, and what kind of communication actually serves the relationships you care about maintaining. The world will keep calling, and you'll keep texting back, because some people speak best when they have time to find the right words, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being one of them.